So a dog adoption blitz during the pandemic means there are a whole lot more dogs in Montreal. And with that, there have also been a lot more reports of dog bites and other aggressive behavior. So is this just a question of numbers? Or maybe owners are not training dogs properly, or perhaps dogs simply weren't able to socialize, right? And they don't know how to behave. What's at play here? We're going to find out. Sophie Gaillard is the acting executive director and the director of animal advocacy and legal affairs at the Montreal SPCA, and she joins us now. Thanks for your time, Sophie.
I'm happy to be here.
So the data from the city shows that 110 households acquired a dog or a cat since the beginning of the pandemic. That is a whole lot more dogs and cats. So when it comes to dogs and these dog bites, do more dogs just automatically mean more dog bites?
Well, statistically speaking, it does make sense, and it would be expected that if you have an increase in the dog population, you would have also an increase in the number of incidents. But as you mentioned in the intro, there are certainly other factors at play here. One is probably an increase in reporting of dog bite incidents, because we have a new provincial law in place that requires veterinarians and physicians to report dog bites to the municipality. And at the level of the City of Montreal, we've also centralized the treatment of dog bite incidents. The follow-up is a lot more rigorous than it was a few years ago, when it was basically up to each borough to handle these cases. So there's a lot more awareness, and it's being taken a lot more seriously by the authorities. So we can expect that there's probably an increase in the reporting of dog bites. And then there's likely the pandemic factor as well. Many people, as you mentioned, acquired a dog during the course of the pandemic, not always from reputable or responsible sources. And we know that one of the main risk factors for dog bites is poor early socialization. So if dogs didn't get socialization properly during that critical period, they are more likely to be prone to developing aggressive behaviors. And also the circumstances of the pandemic made it much more hard for owners to properly socialize their animals once they brought them at home, because of course we ourselves couldn't socialize. So there are certainly all those factors that are contributing to what we're seeing.
So sounds like, a combination of things coming together here, and with not a great result. What is that critical period when you were talking about, do they have a certain amount of time by which dogs have to be properly socialized, and otherwise it's just not really going to work?
Well, socialization is an ongoing process through, the early weeks, days, months of a dog's life. But there certainly is very early socialization that needs to happen. Even, as of 3 weeks, dogs should start to be handled, manipulated by people, exposed to certain situations. So we're talking very early when they're still nursing puppies. And then there's a whole other phase that needs to be done when they're puppies, when they've been separated from the mother, brought home in their new home, and that needs to keep on going, the socialization. So exposing them to new situations and making sure that every time they're exposed to a new situation, it's a positive experience for the dog, so that they create positive associations with new environments, new people, etc.
So, Sophie, as I hear you kind of run down the list of what you should be doing when you get that puppy, and you also mentioned it depends to some degree as to where you got that dog. How much of this problem is, do you think anyway, having to do with regulation, where you can and can't buy dogs, i.e. puppy mills, et cetera? Is that still wide open? Is that part of the problem here?
Yes, that's certainly part of the problem. We saw during the pandemic there was a huge increase in breeding and sale of dogs. And unfortunately, we still have some pretty lax regulations when it comes to breeding. We do have new regulations that were recently adopted that are only coming into force in February 2024 when it comes to, for example, what we were talking about, so very early socialization that will now be required, but that's only kicking in 2024. So for now, if you acquire a dog from someone who's not particularly responsible or doesn't really know what they're doing, or is a large-scale breeder that just doesn't spend the time required to properly take care of the animals, then you're certainly running the risk of acquiring a dog who doesn't have proper early socialization and is at risk for behavior problems. And that's why we, of course, very strongly encourage adoption at an animal shelter like the Montreal SPCA or a rescue organization where each animal's behavior has been assessed by an expert and where we really strive to make the right match between the person and the dog's temperament. We provide advice, education, follow-ups, and we also recommend also considering adopting an older animal who has been around the block, knows his or her manners, and has been properly socialized and is basically just ready to be in a new home and doesn't require too much work in terms of socialization.
Yeah, that sounds ideal. Sophie, we're going to run out of time, but quickly before we do, we often hear this question of whether the problem is really the dog or the owner. Certainly when it comes to more aggressive breeds, have you seen in these reports of dog bites, does that tend to be the case that it is these breeds that are known to be more aggressive?
Well, actually, we have discussed this a lot in the past few years when we had the issue in Montreal with the potential pit bull ban, et cetera. Breed doesn't actually predict behavior, and that it has been established scientifically. It is a very poor predictor of behavior and aggressive behavior, especially. Early socialization, a history of neglect and abuse is also one of the critical factors, which is why it's important to properly enforce animal protection legislation as a means of reducing dog bites. And also dog training methods. We know that aversive dog training methods that are based on punishment and dominance do increase the risk of developing aggressive behavior in dogs. Do you have dogs we're out of time, but do you have dogs right now available at the SPCA for adoption? Yes, we do. Excellent. We have many dogs available, so definitely visit our website, make an appointment, and come meet your match. Thank you, Sophie. Appreciate your time today. Thank you for having me. Have a nice day. You too. That's Sophie GAILLARD from the Montreal SPCA.